Welcome, ghouls, ghoulettes, and guesties to GonstFM Off Air, the official podcast companion to 66.6 GonstFM, the internet radio station dedicated to the band Ghost and the wider Gonst community. I'm Papa X.
And I'm Uncle Ghoul.
And we are back with our Road to Skeletá series. And we last left off on Meliora, and we are picking up with the introduction of Papa Emeritus Zero, the rise of Cardinal Copia, and a fourth sacred psalm. This is the promise of Prequelle, and there is a reason this episode is called that, because, Papa 3 gets dragged off stage, a new figure emerges from the shadows, and amongst a controversial era for the band, there was a lot of what the fuck is about to happen. So I am trying to say that the title of this episode is kind of what the fandom was hoping for, as far as is this album going to show promise? Is this going to still be okay?
This was an interesting time for so many fans, myself included. It's one that holds near and dear to my heart, but also comes with a lot of kind of not so great memories. I have to be honest about that when talking about this album, because it shapes my thoughts and opinions and how I feel about everything and how I feel when I listen to it. Is because, we're coming fresh off of the heels of the lawsuit. And without getting too much into that, it was kind of like a divorce, and you're the child in the middle of it. And there was a lot of questions of basically, without these ex-members, is it still the same Ghost? Is it the same Ghost? Is it, what we come to expect? Is it what we want? There's a lot of uncertainty and just kind of confusion because, if you weren't there or anyone for that time, there was no statement released really from the band. It was just kind of like they showed up at the tail end of that last cycle with an new lineup of ghouls with very little explanation. And there were rumors flying around, and there was statements from past members on Facebooks and stuff, but really no addressing it. And a lot of people, it was kind of a turmoil for the fandom, pun intended. And then the new figure, I made a video a while ago on my accounts talking about how controversial, that was in itself, just introducing the new character and him not being a Papa. And, this album is interesting because they take a lot of risks, and with the whole era and the whole everything. But there's that hope, like you said.
From somebody who came into the fandom after the lawsuit, I can't imagine how much the facade, I hate to use the word facade, but it was, for lack of a better term, you know what I mean? Like we all, as fans of this band, I think to an extent, we LARP, we cosplay, we're in on the joke, if you will. When we see Papa on stage, it's not Tobias, it's Papa. We're like, hello, that's Papa. You know what I mean? That's at least how I try to do it, because it's fun that way. So I would say with that, I couldn't imagine being in the midst of not knowing fuck all about everybody, and then it just kind of being vomited harshly into the public eye, or as much of the public eye as it was.
Yeah. The thing was, it's hard to love something so much and have a negative press or negative association around it. Because I think the thing that sometimes people forget is they did a good job of convincing you, even though we all knew that this was, or maybe we didn't really all know, actually. We knew Tobias Forge was there, but we didn't know how much this was a band and how much was a solo project. And they did a great job by having the ghouls do interviews and stuff, convincing you that they were important members of the band. So when they came out with their, Facebook post and said, hey, we're outing, who the singer is, this is who we are, all the names are there. And for that magic to kind of die in such a negative way, to where at first, and I'm not saying, looking back, it's obviously different, but then you didn't know who was telling the truth because there was only one side. So you gravitate towards, either I don't know, I'm going to wait and find out, or you gravitate towards that side. So it was just kind of a lot of people took a side immediately. So it was just not nice to have discourse on the internet. There was, before everything got started and everything. And then we had gotten used to seeing so many of these members on stage. The live shows are so important. And now they're gone. And there's just people there who are doing a great job in their place, but it's not the same. It's just like, where's the explanation? Where's this? And then it's just, the whole thing. And as you mentioned, it was just kind of a degree of, wow, things are different now. And the LARPing, there's been a shift post the lawsuit and everything. Is we knew for a long time, in theory, that it was Tobias Forge. There was the infamous leaking with a photo with Phil Anselmo, and I forgot it was Danzig, I think, a bunch of other people in that photo. There's been other leaks. It was an open secret, but everyone kind of pretended they didn't know who the guy was. We knew who it was, but it was more fun to just be like, I don't know who Tobias is. But after that, it was just everywhere. His name is everywhere. You couldn't avoid it. You can now look at concert reviews and see them say Tobias struts across the stage instead of Papa. And that kind of, for a long time, took me out of it, of just seeing, that everywhere. Is like, it just seemed like media, now that they had this scoop, was okay with being like Ghost frontman Tobias Forge instead of Papa Emeritus. And that just kind of takes the magic of that, world down a little bit. And it was like, okay, what's the next step?
The next step was to shed the Papa image, because this not only marks, in my opinion, as far as from Meliora to Prequelle, not only does this mark kind of a grander shift, because we've noticed that we've been talking about this since the Infestisumam episode, how I mentioned it in the Opus episode, how every record seems to get bigger and bigger, and the scope becomes larger and larger. So we've seen a shift from Meliora, which we talked about it going from Ghost to being kind of like spooky in the sense of like we're still this like smaller cult metal rock band. Now they're getting more mainstream success with the success of Square Hammer, because let's not forget, Square Hammer was a huge fucking deal when it came out.
Yeah, it was on Monday Night Football. And I remember everyone freaking out about that. Like, did you hear Ghost on Monday Night Football? Like, that's huge. That's big leagues.
Thinking about it, like having seen Ghost in passing, I've told the story several times on the podcast, so forgive me, everybody that's listening that's heard this. But it was one of the times I was in the Hot Topic and I saw the Square Hammer video, and I didn't know who Ghost was. And I just had a memory triggered where you were like, oh, it was on Monday Night Football. And I'm sitting here like, motherfucking hell, this song was on WWE NXT San Antonio TakeOver. It was the official theme song. I remember seeing that and I was like, oh, that's pretty fucking banging song. And I forgot about it. And it's not like, oh, it was forgetful. It's just, in passing was like, fuck, I don't remember the name. None of that shit. So anyway, like to bring it back here, it marks a bigger style shift too. While Meliora was, kind of sci-fi driven, kind of the 70s. This album feels more, Prequelle feels more like 80s Queen arena rock, like bigger fucking songs. There's string arrangements now, more of them in the choir is back, like with more backing vocals on some of the tracks. Bigger drums. I didn't think they could get bigger than Meliora, but Ludwig Kinberg is back, and he was telling me that he recorded this on a bigger kit. Like the kit that he used for this one was particularly a bigger set. And it shows, because he was talking about how much more, not that like Meliora wasn't fun to record, but he did speak about having a blast doing this particular album.
This album has a huge sonic sound to it, and it's very orchestral. But the other thing with this album too that I appreciate is, if I can bring it up, is it has a great campaign leading up to it that really got you hyped in the midst of everything. From the people in Dr. Mass showing up at football games, and you just see them out of the corner of your eye, or photos snapped online showing up, with the play Dr. Mass in the 6-1, and to the vast amount of interviews, to the start of the chapters. We really got the start of the chapters around this time. And I remember that it actually, for some people who don't know, it got uploaded early, like a day before, and it was up for like 3 minutes, chapter 1, and then it was taken down. And then it came up the next day. It showed up again, like actually up. But it's just funny because it was like, what is this? And I remember watching that, and Nihil looks different than he did as Zero. And I thought it was fake. I thought it was like a fake thing that, like, I didn't think it was real, even though it was on the official account, because I just seen it on Facebook. And then I saw the thing and I was like, whoa, we're getting an actual in-depth story. Everything changed. In production for the band was bigger, to the profile picture being black, and then it was red, and then it was the new logo. And they really built this era up, even more so than past eras, promotion-wise.
I think they had to kind of build it up from there, because we spoke at the time that you were just guesting on here, where in a sense, I don't think it's necessarily what he did, but I feel like in a way, shedding the Papa image and then becoming Cardinal Copia and basically being a character that doesn't really have face paint, except for the eyes and stuff like that. That doesn't really have face paint on the mask or really anything extravagant as far as the robes and stuff go. It was kind of a way to humanize the frontman character, I think. That was kind of like my interpretation, was that maybe people, and maybe Tobias to an extent, felt like a negative consonance with the eras beforehand and maybe wanted to just kind of shed skin, so to speak, get away from that. And I mean, lyrically even, like, we'll get into the album proper in a little bit, because I definitely do want to talk about the build to this record and like the chapters.
It's important.
Yeah. I think it was a big way for him to kind of shed and like have a rebirth, really, because I look at Prequelle also in that sense, is that it is a rebirth. It is a different time. It's a different, band. It's a different era. I think that it only went up from there. I really enjoyed this album, but like the build to it was so fucking fascinating to go back and look at. I wish that I could have been there in real time watching it play out, honestly, because as we're watching the rollout of Skeletá happen in real time, that's such a fun thing. But going back and seeing everything building to Rats and then the chapters, because the chapters from then, you got to think that was like 2018, but the chapters are still kind of going as of now, and it's 2025.
It was kind of, we had the summoning before.
So yeah, we already had Sister at that point.
Which is the only thing that clued me in that chapter 1 was real, was that Sister. But it's interesting because the summoning is completely different than the chapters in production and in tone and in everything going into it. It's a completely different vibe. And it's really interesting because so much of, I can't stress it enough. You mentioned Rebirth and it's a new band. And I always do say this. I say the band that was before, it's like they died and came back as Rebirth, like a zombie or something. It's a different band, but they're both phenomenal. There's people who get hung up on Ghost has changed. They're not the same. I won't listen to them anymore. I always tell people, if you ever have that, there's a mental block, I think, for some older fans that they can't get over just treating it like it's Ghost 2.0 or something different, and they compare it back to the first three. And I mean this in the most positive way. If you can ignore the first three albums and don't compare back constantly in your head, you'll have a much better time with everything going forward if you truly treat it as a different band that is also phenomenal, because there is that sonic change. And I don't mean this negatively, like some people, interpret that saying, but I mean this truly as everything about Ghost changed, my opinion, for the better at that point. And if you view it, if you're not constantly comparing it to Opus Eponymous or even Meliora, you're going to have a much better time with it, because everything got bigger. It got more catchy. It got poppier. It got light. It got more accessible, commercial. It got bigger production. You could tell there's money behind everything, from the visuals to the characters to the, you don't have to compare Cardinal Copia to Papa 2. I saw a lot of complaints, people always complaining, back to Papa 2, which is funny because people complained about Papa 2. But it's that thing. It's like everyone complains, but really, the band evolved so much, and it is a completely different band there.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of people will say, well, you're talking about like the live band. Sure, because that's live, but also Tobias changed who he worked with in the studio as well. Like, yeah. And I mean, the only layover from past records was Ludwig, because Ludwig pretty much stayed one of the regulars on any Ghost record, from Opus to Meliora to Prequelle to the 7 Inches of Satanic Panic EP. And the last thing he played on were both the Metallica cover and the original Hunter's Moon. He had a big contributing factor to this band's sound. Mm-hmm. And if anybody is like trying to compare from Meliora to Prequelle, and I know I keep bringing Ludwig up, but I really feel like his playing was extremely important on both of these records.
Yes.
By him still being a constant collaborator here, I think the transition from that album to this one, it may not have been as smooth if it weren't for him, and if it weren't for some of the stuff that he contributed to this record.
Because you have that tie to all the way back to the first record. There, you have that tie that is going through to date most of the records. And with Tobias playing bass, you have that rhythm section not changing, which keeps that solid, think there's a vibe there that, and we'll get into it when we talk about Impera, but his drumming mixed with Tobias's bass playing is a winning combination that has the groove of Ghost. And I know this album was ambitious too, because he talked a lot about interviews about being inspired by Elton John and more piano focused. And this album takes a backseat from guitars a little bit. Not to say there aren't amazing riffs on it, but it takes more of a backseat for more almost cinematic musical theater. I hear people say Broadway metal a lot when discussing Ghost after Meliora. And it is true, is that there's a shift in the songwriting, right? And it's for a reason. They're writing for, I remember Tobias doing an interview where he talked about, we talk a lot about that gallop, that triplet waltz feel thing that, happens on a lot of the albums. And he talked about how it doesn't work well in big venues because of the echoing. So he was focusing on more mid-tempo rockers with big cinematic things that will fill you right for the venues you're going to be playing. And at that time, they were planning on transitioning into arenas, mid-sized arenas from small theaters. And you can hear that going forward. Every Ghost song now, more so than the first 3 albums, has more catchy poppy choruses that are going to be, they're not going to be fast, echoing lots of notes. There's more space so that they can fit better in an arena and they can, work better without that echo. All these types of things, you can hear a change. And I think that goes to the sound change people talk about, but it's this theatrics and this bombast and this, people talk about like theater kids making metal music. That's what it sounds like. And that sound really, to me, started on this album.
Same here. It's very anthemic. Again, if you look at the carryover, like we keep bringing it up, if you listen to the studio albums back to back and exclude the EPs from your back to back listening, the Die Out, and again, this does not include Squarehammer because it was on the Pope Star EP. If you listen to the Die Out of Deus in Absentia from Meliora and go straight into Ashes, really look at those 2 songs. It is the rebirth. Like I view Ashes as, it's really haunting. That song is extremely fucking haunting, which I think it was really neat that his kid did vocals on that one.
Yeah.
That was really awesome. And hearing that build into the drum intro, like with the keyboard and rolling into rats, like I'm not starting like the album review just yet, but just like that part right there was really like, okay, they didn't die. Like we're about to kickstart something that's going to be fucking huge. And I think all of that tied in with the introduction of these new characters to Ghost's universe. And I'm speaking, of course, of Papa Nil, who was known as Papa Emeritus Zero at first and was fucking ancient. Because when they dragged Terzo off stage, this old motherfucker with an oxygen tank and a walker comes out, and he's got like white and gold and red robes, and his hair is falling out, and the way he is speaking is really breathy and like real like echo. Yeah, man, it's like, God, what the fuck is this thing? And to see the first glimpse we got of him was him being really old, and then the promo photos with Copia and him in the throne, because I think, just from my perspective, there wasn't much that everybody thought about. Like, we don't know what's going on.
There were interesting theories. I don't want to get too much into the lore stuff because, that's a whole other thing.
Sure. But
it's an interesting time, I have to note, because he comes out, right? And one thing I want to point out that I love is the timing of this. Just from a stage managing theatrical standpoint, Papa 3 is just barely off stage by the time Zero is already coming out. Zero is halfway is visible as Papa 3 is still being pulled off stage. And that's just such a cool timing moment of there's no gap. It's immediately, the ghouls are walking off and Zero's still making his way onto the stage. It perfectly encapsulates. And people at that show, when that happened, I had friends who were there and they were like, we thought the show was going to continue. So we waited around for 25, 30 minutes afterwards. The lights came up just because it was so erupt of an ending.
I heard there was mass confusion too. Like there were some people that thought somebody jumped on stage and dragged him off, for real.
Yeah, there was a real confusion of it because while we knew something was happening, the change has always been, it
was like a Papa to Papa,
transfer
right?
Of power. Yes.
Yeah.
And so this was just out of nowhere. And they had played the night before, I forgot where, but also in Sweden. And it was an identical set. The set list was identical. So everyone who had been to probably both nights had an idea of what to expect. That the rare song that night was they're playing Elizabeth again, and Secular Hayes was back after I think it was gone from the European tour or something like that, or the American tour. And so it was just kind of like that was expected to be the special thing, and that maybe we get a glimpse at the future, especially once the white smoke was being shown. But that was such a drastic change. But then not long after, we're used now to this big break between cycles, but it really wasn't that long of a break in between. And they were announcing things in that break, including Whack in Open Air, that they were going to be playing. And it was announced that Papa Zero and his name was Skulls would be the band that was playing. And on the press release, and someone said in the comments, don't you mean like Papa 4? And they said, no, this information came directly from the band. This was what we were sent to put in the press release. And I have screenshots of that. I'll post them after this episode. But they were telling us, at least from Wackin's social medias, that Papa Zero was going to be the front man. So there were all types of theories that he was going to drain someone's youth and get young and then become the front man. Or maybe he was going to just be an old school, like Papa 1, old Papa. Or then there was theories that on Ceremony and Devotion, Papa 1 is wearing Cardinal Copia's rings. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but people were thinking that Papa 1 was going to come back to life and drain Papa Zero's life force. So there was all types of theories that people had to it.
Damn.
So it was kind of moving around at the time. And you can find some of those on Reddit too, probably, if you went back, of until we were convinced to some degree that they posted the 8-track video that Papa Zero was the front man based off of that, until they started, launching the VIP packages and they mentioned the protege. And it was like, okay, so there's someone else there. But, people were saying oh, the red in the 8-track video is the red in the inside of his robes. Or you can find comments of people calling it Papa Zero in that video, because we thought that was the front man to some degree. Some people said introductory character, but most people thought it was the front man.
God damn, that's wild.
Yeah, I think that context is interesting, even more so because as we get into the album, if you look at it that way, it's kind of a different thing. And also, so the last thing I'll touch upon with the lore of that is there's that interview where Tobias said that Papa Zero is the front man, or the Papa. He is in charge. He's just too old to do it. So Copia is the Toastmaster, as he said.
Right.
So in a way, I know we think of Copia having 2 album cycles and this being Copia's album, but as far as the reign of Papa, it really was Zero's second era. He's on a lot of the merchandise. He's the one in charge. Copia is just kind of the live figurehead for the shows.
Which I think is a really cool thing about that era's merchandise, because I own a lot of Ghost t-shirts, and very many of them with Copia has some kind of reference to Papa Nihil on there, and vice versa, and whether or not it's the Reanimator shirt, or if it's, the festival, one where it's the Puppet Master looking one. It's not the Puppet Master, but it's Nihil kind of reigning over, and Copia is underneath him and shit. And
which was the tour posters for most of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I loved all of that so much because it was such a really cool way to keep something familiar around without it being the actual front man.
And I just got to point this out. I feel like I'm rambling on, but an interesting thing that I was thinking about yesterday is, do you think, and I want to pose this question to you, that Papa Nihil might have been kind of a test for Perpetua with how will people react to a Papa with no silicone mask? Because he's the first Papa we get to where the young version and the old version is maskless. And the next time we got a new character is the one with just, basically no mask, a half mask. But I wonder if that was planted, because he really did start talking in that era about using less prosthetics in the future.
Yeah.
Or less facial coverings. That if they were thinking, okay, does this still look and feel like Papa? Not from, a story standpoint, but simply from a practical standpoint of the young Papa Nihil easing people into the idea of kind of dropping that full, traditional rubber mask. It's interesting to think about if they were ever considering okay, when designing Nihil, let's design him, that way.
No, I agree. I think so. I think it is a test, and it was a good one too. Especially when you have an actor like Alan doing it, who is fucking phenomenal. I think that is another thing. Like we mentioned with Ludwig being integral to the music. I feel like the people portraying these characters were absolutely integral to the success of the rest of this project.
Well, it's interesting. We're talking so much about the story and the other things without the music yet, but I think it speaks to how interesting this album and important it is that there is so much versus the other first 3 albums, which I love. There's so much that you could even just talk about without even getting to the album that was there because of how important this era and this album is everything surrounding it. There's way more to say than there normally is.
Sure. Story and lore aside, jumping into the actuality of the situation that we spoke of prior with the nameless ghouls and the lawsuit. Lyrically, as we jump in from Ashes, which we mentioned before, is a very brooding, dread-filled intro that jumps into Rats, which was the lead single. And it is a heavy fucking song. Like, honestly, like it's really fun. It's a fun riff. It's a fun tempo, dancey, like hard rock driven, but lyrically it has a lot to do with the lawsuit at hand, but it's disguised enough where if you didn't know it, you wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah.
Because I know you were mentioning earlier, it was kind of a difficult listen because of that.
This album, and I'll just get it out now as I explain it, I have a unique to some degree perspective I'm not, alone in this, but unique to, I think, a lot of people, is that this hits home. The lawsuit for me, I've been in this fandom for now 12 years, and I've been deeply involved online and everything, and it took a toll on my mental health, as it would anyone, to be running Facebook groups or whatever it be, and seeing my favorite band being talked about so negatively. And I kind of wanted, to a degree going into this, that it would be an escape from all of that. And instead I was greeted with an album that head-on addressed it, which was interesting and difficult for me at first. But Rats as a song immediately won me over. It didn't take long from hearing the snippet, that first snippet of it. I immediately just loved this song. They did a real radio snippet on a radio show of just the pre-chorus and the chorus. I had been saying for a long time that I wanted Ghost to go in 80s rock territory. And this song opens up immediately, plunging you straight into 80s rock territory. And this is a great time to where I can make my favorite comparison that I make, which is old Ghost is Black Sabbath and Ghost afterwards is Ozzy's solo career, which sounds strange, but truly, I think this song personifies that. Gone are the kind of evil Sabbathy riffings as much, and that more kind of 80s rock, almost hair metal-esque vibe starts coming through, but with that spooky overcurrent.
Yeah, I would agree. And even the music video is just as playful.
Our first introduction really to the Cardinal, we had seen the Cardinal, but seeing him dancing, and it puts you off at first, if to some people,
Well, it's fucking hilarious to me, honestly.
Oh, I love it. I love it now, and I loved it then, but I know that everyone was like, why are you dancing? Why is he doing, but it's such a driving song that combines the elements of Ghost that we know, great poppy vocal melodies, driving bass, great drumming, spooky organ, all those elements, and bring something brand new and super energetic, carrying right off the back of Square Hammer, with that big anthemic arena rock.
This was the album that I took the plunge with. Whenever I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to make an effort to listen to all of the material because I'm really actually interested in hearing what this band is and what they have to offer. And I think for me, like the stuff that I grew up on, both of us really, the stuff that I grew up on especially, that's what it was that I grew up on. I grew up on Sabbath and like solo Ozzy, but I also, had a lot of 80s like hair metal bands that I liked and I listened to, glam rock, arena rock, and it ranged everywhere from that type of music to stuff like Queen and Led Zeppelin and even like we mentioned earlier, Elton John. Like I listened to so much stuff that fell into this release and it drew me in so hard. And I'm honestly kind of glad this was my first album. I think I might have had a different viewpoint had I entered anywhere else, really.
That's true. And I think that people have issues with this album to a degree because of that. And I don't know if that's right. I think that you have to give this album a real fair shake. But if you are used to the other 3 albums, it's a departure. But if you can put that aside and look at this album for what it is, it's a phenomenal album. And I grew up, like you were saying, with all those bands. Queen. I was a huge Kiss fan, and I'd go see Kiss, and Kiss always had bands with them. It was whether it was Def Leppard or, Motley Crue or any of these, I hate to say it, aging, 80s bands, but I love those bands, and I've always loved those bands. And I would go, I would get my dad's CD collection, or, the radio or whatever, and just playing guitar. Anyone who starts playing guitar or any instrument, you gravitate towards that era of 70s classic rock stuff, and that sound to me reminds me of driving in the car with my dad, him putting on his Boston CDs or the Eagles or Elton John is my dad's favorite. My dad's seen Elton John, I think 12 times in concert.
Shit.
My dad was like a huge Elton John fan, and Billy Joel. And so all of that shaped my music taste immensely. And this album and this song and this, where we're going with this, was right up my alley because it is all of that.
I think it's a great opening track because most of the opening tracks on all of Ghost material, they really, they get you amped up or whatever, we spoke about how Spirit kind of has that slow gradual build, but then From the Pinnacle to the Pit was the banger open, was the second song, but it was the fucking banger on that one. This one, this is the instrumental opener with Ashes, but then Rats just goes. It's like pedal to the metal. It just starts loud. That drum intro, and then the guitar riff coming it is just fucking loud, and it's amazing, and it's rocking. It's a rocking tune. But
yeah, as Papa would say.
Yeah, but as we leave Rats, which ends abruptly, oh shit, that was a ride, and then Faith just
with the heaviest riff. One of the heaviest riffs.
Faith is the heaviest fucking song on this album.
It is, and you know what? I just thought about that's when listening to this is it ends with the heavy riff in Rats and goes into an even heavier riff with Faith, and it's a great transition that works well because Rats ends so abruptly on that heavy chugging riff, and then it comes back to an even heavier riff with Faith.
Yeah, with the drum stabs on the hat, the bass drum, and the snare at the same time, and I love oh my god, I love that lick. That is a fun guitar lick to play and to hear.
It so out of place on a Ghost record when you first hear it. It's that's almost something you would expect from I don't know, a much, much heavier metal band, almost Slayer or something. It's a very modern metal riff. But also retro, it's something that you would expect a brutal guy to write, which not to say that Ghost aren't, but we don't think of that often as that type of metal riff being used. It's much more like Black Sabbath metal riffs, where this is much more like your skull crushing metal riffs,
Yeah, because a lot of the riffs beforehand were very doomy. It was very doom metal, and this is like we mentioned, it's leading into arena rock territory. Faith is just a great song, dude. This one, I think above all, is probably the song that would get you more amped up on this album, especially. Rats is fun, but this one, just mentioning that transition, the first time I heard this, I was like, man, that was a great song. And then Faith comes in, I was like, oh, fuck me, here we go. It was just awesome.
Yeah.
It's an album that I honestly wish, there's movies out there where I tell people all the time, you know what, you're going to love this movie, and the one thing that you're going to hate about this movie is that you'll never experience it again for the first time. And that's how I feel about Prequelle. That's how I feel about the Rats to Faith transition there, because it's just so goddamn good.
And Faith is an interesting song too because it got a live debut, and I feel like people forget that sometimes. It was a song that was, for most people in the fandom at the time, we heard it through a YouTube video of them playing at the Roxy, and just something about it. When you hear it on the album, it has that, I think, probably the same feel or same kind of effect, which was hearing that live for the first time in the video was, oh my God, where on earth did that come from? Where did that, it's a song that, every time it comes in, it's like, wow. And I'll say it here too. This was another one of the songs for me that was hard to get into after a while. For that same reason, lyrically, is where it's like, oh God, I love the instrumentals, but the lyrics just make me sad.
Yeah.
And because of that, I talk about it, like, and I have to be open about it throughout this, is that it, to some degree, being so involved with that whole drama, if you will, from not even just being online, but like I had friends of the former members asking me to share the GoFundMe in my DMs because I ran a Facebook group. Like I got involved in a way that I didn't expect I was going to be involved. It's like a lot of people who ran fan pages did, as they were, people were preying on fan pages to exploit, the fandom to kind of take a side. And so that division and everything kind of comes up when I hear those lyrics. And so for a while, and I'll talk about this later on, I did a re-listen and I've changed a lot of my thoughts. But Faith was one of those songs where it was like, oh, I love this instrumentally, but the lyrics make it hard to listen to,
Yeah. Yeah, because I think out of all the songs on this album, that one is the most direct.
You can misinterpret it in different ways, but if you have any vague idea of what's going on, it doesn't feel like a character singing.
No, it doesn't. It does not.
And it's a metal diss track, right? At its core, it is a diss track.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for that, but it's full of venom, and it's heavy, and it's chugging, and it's driving, and it's got this cool proggy chorus.
Yeah, the chorus is real fun. Like
it's fun and it's weird.
Yeah, because I picture like whenever you tell people in the crowd, hey, put your hands and like wave them back and forth. That's the kind of chorus it feels like, where like it's real wavy and like up and down and flowy, and it's fun.
Yeah, it's very moving and it's very evil. I don't know, like there's something about this song that just makes me feel, if I could show you guys listening my face right now, it's this just scrunched up, just kind of, it makes you want to just move your head, bob your head, and just crunch your face, It's that like old school, just like, you see like guys listening to like Slayer stuff, in the movies, and it's just that like that,
they had that like stank face almost.
Yeah, it's that, like that, just that riff, because it's so groovy. It's almost like a funky blues. If you ever listen to really good blues, I used to go to Memphis a lot, and I'd play in blues competitions, and I'd hear that, you hear that solid, tight rhythm section that makes you just be like, yeah, I can groove to that. It's like groove metal, It's like groovy but heavy, and it's just like, yeah, that chorus hits.
It does. It's fucking
that driving ride bell and the driving beat, and the bass moving along, and that riff, how it moves, like it's a constantly moving is the best way I can explain that chorus,
dude. You seriously brought it up, and you're like, oh yeah, that ride bell, and you'll get this. The drummer brain in me just went, oh yeah, it's like, oh yeah,
dude. I'm thinking about that chorus and that groove, and just the way that flows, and I'm gripping my mic. I'm like tensed up. I'm like, dude, I'm quelling my urges to burst. I'm like,
big time.
Yeah, it's like, dude, it's so good. It hits you right in that spot. It's like, oh fuck. Yeah. You can't even. There's nothing else for it. It's just like it hits you. It's that meat and potatoes.
Yeah, Faith's fucking great.
Yeah, and when I re-listened to it recently, I just I got over that. I just have to say that it's no longer as hard of a listen for me, and it's just now it's like, wow, great song.
Good.
Yeah.
And then you move into See the Light, which I think might be the most underrated track on this album.
Absolutely. And in the catalog, maybe too.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that's like, it's something interesting because it's one of those songs. Ghost has two kind of categories for songs for me, and that's big radio rock hits and album tracks that work perfectly in the context of the album. They could be, a big radio hit, but they never are. This is in that latter half too. This is where, like, my favorite Ghost song of all time, by the way, is Death Knell. And this, to me, is similar to where this works so well in the context of the album. And it's just an underrated song that, because it doesn't maybe have the most catchy chorus, that's super poppy and big, I think sometimes it gets overlooked as like a great, and it's never been played live too. But it's one of those songs where it's like, I love this track. And it's really interesting. It's almost electronic at parts.
Yeah.
Like there's this, drum wise, and it's like almost has these weird sections, but it has a really cool, heavy, almost old school Ghost sounding chorus with great lyrics that we were talking about before with Body and Blood, the kind of blasphemous, lyricism. And it's here too.
I loved the bridge piece where the solo, would be with the synthesizer with the pitch wheel, coming into play on the synthesizer. And even in the chorus itself, the walk up and walk down of the notes that are happening in the back. It's a really well thought out piece, like musically speaking. There's a lot going on. The more you listen to it, the more you can find. I unfortunately, as a musician, you do understand this as well. I can't listen to a song like as is. I'm always focused on like maybe one or two instruments at a time. So I think it is both a blessing and a curse to be a musician because you can't not, do that at a lot of the times. It's very rare. It's very rare that I can just listen and take an entire song in and hear everything cohesively working together as one sound. Because most of the time I'm focused on smaller nuances because I listen to a lot of my stuff with my earbuds. So I'm fixated on certain parts.
One thing that's interesting in the song too, I don't know if people have noticed, is this might sound weird, the drums in it in the verses give me almost kind of like a electronic house music vibe. Where it's kind of that boom, 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 boom. It's like a pulse over these kind of pads and synths and everything. It's like, maybe that's not the right term, but it's very modern sounding. It almost feels like we take a break from the heavy kind of arena rock stuff for something a little more new age and modern, which gives an interesting texture to those verses. So when that chorus hits and you have those big tom and everything, and the chugging guitars, it hits so hard. It's like a drop, it's like a breakdown almost, like sonically, because it hits you in that, like, okay, we're coming out of that kind of, lone vocal line after those, that beautiful little melody and the keys and the sparse drumming to full band. It's dynamically, this song is amazingly interesting.
Yeah, that's a reason I would love to hear it played live too. I would love to hear how it translates because this has so much potential in a live setting.
I also can just see when I hear this song, I can see the Cardinal in his red robes. I can see him on top of that platform with the smoke behind him, like we see all the time on those, that era shows. And I always I can't ever hear this chorus, even thinking about it in my head. I can just visualize that moment live.
Yeah, like he's got like one foot up on like a monitor or something, like, power stancing the fuck out of that chorus, man.
I can see him doing that arm thing he does where he swings his arm, up in the air on the Eat Me,
Yes.
And just the whole crowd, and maybe like, the lights coming on to show the flash over the crowd during those, like, dude, this song would be great live.
I think it would surprise people, like people that really enjoy the deeper cuts of Ghost catalog, because we go to rituals and of course we expect to hear the hits and, some of the more well-known songs, but like to pull a song like See the Light Out would be fantastic. I have nothing really bad to say about that track in particular. And
me neither.
Thematically speaking, I love this record a lot. It goes back to the Dark Ages, because this is really like speaking about plagues and disease and, wretch, things like that. So you get into miasma, or as I like to call it, miasma, because Papa Nihil is so fucking old that he's blowing hard on a saxophone and he's like, so it's not miasma for Papa Nihil, it's miasma. But what a great midway track. And at this point in time, we all know what the big deal about this instrumental piece is. However, at the time that this came out, I went on the Wayback Machine, to look at stuff. And I loved that there were people that had heard this one before it was released on record. And they were like, you guys are not going to fucking believe what Ghost has done on this album, on a particular track. And it's the saxophone solo.
An interesting thing you brought up too is the plague thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, God, this album is much more interesting than I even gave it credit for until we started talking about it, because I didn't realize how much I have to say about this album and how much we can talk about this album and these songs and the time and everything, because this episode I can already tell is going to be longer than the others because there's so much to talk about. And I didn't even get to the plague. The plague thing is one of the most big aspects of this album, and I forgot about it because there's so much other stuff.
Right?
And how often can you say that? It's like, I was just thinking, I was like, you're right. Like, because I wasn't even thinking, I was already in my head overthinking about how I was going to talk about how Miasma was debuted live and everyone's reactions, as you brought up. Like, you're not ready for this. And the moment and just seeing that for the first time, because that's something we're not really going to fully get. We're going to get it a little bit this cycle upcoming. But they toured for 3 or 4 months before this album was out.
Yeah.
They started the tour, I think, it's a month, right? Because I think it started in like late April, May, the tour, and the album was out June 1st. So it was like a month of touring of these songs being live debuted. And I remember people going on Reddit and trying to figure it out. And the one standout was always Miasma, because holy shit, a saxophone solo. What the fuck? And then also, just the caliber of this song. And, the callbacks to like, was it Beat It? With that guitar part and everyone talking about it. Like, I just remember this one being, we had instrumentals in Ghost albums before, but nothing like this. It is, for better or for worse, a moment in the live shows and on album that can never be reached. And even whether you like it or not, it is a moment that everyone talks about. The saxophone solo.
Yeah, dude. It is a high point, if not the high point on this album, because we were talking about how it builds and then it has like the back half, which I do have opinions on. But Miasma as a whole, dude, it's fun. It's funky. It's fresh. It is fun, funky, fresh.
Thematically, you can see, we talk about this in the album. We have this energy to this album, and you can feel the sickness sinking in now. Miasma is full of life, is energetic, but it has a historical and contextual meaning to it, to where if you know that that's happening, good things are not happening in the story. If there's Miasma, people are not well.
And there are allusions to death, even more so after this song is played on the album, because Miasma leads into Dance Macabre, which is I think is probably the biggest song on this album and one of Ghost's most well-beloved of their entire catalog. There's a lot of allusion to, like, shit, are we about to die? Yeah, we're about to die. Let's make the most of it while we're here, pretty much, This is probably going to be a weird fucking comparison. People out there they are literally going to scratch their heads. They're going to look at me, and they're going to be like, you're a dumbass. This is Ghosts. It's the end of the world as we know it. This is the REM track on this album.
And this track is interesting lyrically, too, and thematically, because it really is, I think Tobias talked about how people in this time, of the plague, we're going to die, so fuck it. Might as well enjoy our lives.
That's it.
Staying out late, drinking, partying, dancing, having the time of their lives, knowing that the clock was running out, which is such an interesting feeling and dark concept of, yeah, everything's all right. I don't have to worry about paying my bills, because I'll be gone, and it really is, as dancey and happy and great as it sounds, it's depressing to think about being in the situation to where you have no time left and it's going to be over. You're going to lose the one you love. You're going to lose your life. You're going to lose everything. And so what is there to lose? As happy as you are and as, jovial as you might feel in the moment, there's always that undercurrent of you're kind of losing your sanity of just, yeah, this is fun. I'm having fun. I love drinking. It's like addiction, it's like you could, you're doing it. It's fun in the moment, but there's not a good reason behind it,
Right.
It's like indulgence for the sake of, there's nothing to lose.
Yeah.
You're too far gone. You're a lost cause. And that's so Ghost, right? That dark, you on the surface level, oh, what a happy, great pop song. And then you listen to it and think about it. and it makes you think, and then it's, wow, that's dark.
Going from Dance Macabre into Pro Memoria, which the intro to Pro Memoria was used as an overture a lot during the chapters videos, to a comedic level, in my opinion. Like it was,
yeah.
And I don't mean it like, oh, it's so bad. Like they keep fucking using it. It's so bad. I legitimately was cracking up. Like they use it for a musical sting for just every little thing. Like when Sister was getting her face unwrapped, when they switched actresses, or when the Cardinal shows up, or, you know, literally anything. But if you take it away and you don't think about all that stuff, and you just look at it in context of Prequelle as another track, this is a great song. I don't care what anybody says. I've actually heard people be like, "Oh man, Pro Memoria fucking sucks." I'm like, it does not fucking suck. Like, what are you on? Like, it's. I think it's a memeable song. Like the chorus is very memeable as far as like, you know, because I think everybody out there listening has heard the line, "Don't you forget about Diane. Don't you forget about your friend Jeff." You know, like we've all made that joke. It's fun, but in the context of Dance Macabre that we were just, you know, speaking on, to go into Pro Memoria, to listen to these lyrics being sung, this is a very mournful track.
I'm going to say something, and I might get roasted for this.
Okay.
This is my favorite song on the album.
I knew we were friends for a reason.
Yeah. This is my favorite track, and I know I have friends, shout out Holly, who agree with that. We've talked about this at length in the past. This track, to me, it is it. It is everything I love. It is this should be on a Broadway production.
Dude. Noah Cutter, Myhoff, and I had this exact discussion. We were talking about if any of Ghost records were ever to be put to a Broadway stage show, this is the album. And this is like the fucking song. Like, oh my God.
Shout out Noah. Love Noah.
Same.
But absolutely, dude. This song, it's so ominous. You know, that opening, like, minor keyboard thing with just the ride bell. Like, you could see that being a Broadway thing, you know? And it's so theatrical and menacing. And it's the only track that, and also the first time, I think maybe the last time the word Lucifer was said on a Ghost album. And the last actual mention to Satan, other than, you know, Satanized and, you know, Call Me Little Sunshine, but really it's the last time and the only time. And that was actually in a press release that it was one time, like an interview, there was a review that said like this is only mentioned once on this album. But yeah, that opening line, Lucifer, you know, whispering, that's insane of an opening line, right?
Yeah.
Silently through your mind. And then, you know, this song lyrically is phenomenal. I mean, people talk about the chorus, and the chorus is a little cheesy, right? I'll absolutely give it that. It's a cheesy kind of, you know, I don't know. I have my own opinions on it. It is. Could it have been something else, I think? Yes. Does the song get a little bit repetitive? Yes. Do I care? No.
Fuck no.
You know?
You shouldn't care.
I think people overlook the verses of this song. Don't you vomit, savage slurs, speed out wickedly is an insanely great line. There's so, like, the whole, lyrically, this song has so much. I could just recite the lyrics like poetry, you know? This album has phenomenal lyricism to it that paints such a vivid picture and is so foreboding and menacing. And I love it for that. And the big choirs towards the end.
It's the big build. Like, that's what I was getting to. Like, it's a big build, and there's the choir, and then there's the organ, like the classic Ghost organ is being played, and there's like a big fade out.
I think with that, we were talking once about, there's an interview with Ghost early on where they talk about, what is your mission? And they say it's ultimately to convince the humanity that the end of the world is a good thing. And this song feels like that. The Cardinal is guiding these people through the end of the world to their demise. And it's that death knell of, you will die.
Cardinal Copia is quite literally the fucking Pied Piper leading our asses.
Which we knew, right? You know, and the t-shirts were released and they called him the Plague Bringer. He, you know, is surrounded by all this death in the Rats video, but it doesn't affect him.
Right.
You know, he is almost a Nosferatu type, right? Where he brings this with him, or it is, you know, he's immune to it or whatever, but, you know, it is if he's there guiding you through, he's guiding humanity through its downfall. like all Ghost albums, right? Some degree, there's that, end times, whether biblical or disease or whatever, or wrath of God, right? As this album is. And Papa or the Cardinal or whoever is our narrator through this.
Yeah.
And this song encapsulates that.
Yeah, it's fucking great, man. And it's funny, we go from your favorite song on this album to my favorite song on this album, and that is Witch Image. I fucking adore this song, man. It is so unbelievably well written. This song has everything that you would really want from a rock song. And I feel like, and this is just my opinion, I feel like this song, if you had to pitch Prequelle as an album, like if you had to pitch this entire album to somebody with one song where they're just like, okay, I can obviously tell, like, you can listen to Death Knell and you know that's Opus Eponymous. You can listen to Year Zero and you know that is Infestissumam. You can listen to Spirit and you know it's Meliora. It's the sound, right? They're like, okay, so what do you pitch Prequelle with? Witch Image. I feel like Witch Image has every nuanced sound from all the other songs compiled into this one. In terms of riffage, drums, big chorus, fun sing-along, melodramatics, literally everything is in this track.
And it's one of my favorites. It is my second favorite. I would almost even tie these two. These two tracks, what a great song run, right? My God, I love this song. And it was phenomenal live. I loved it the moment I heard it. It hits to my pop sensibilities and my loving of a great poppy song with instrumental. I don't know. It feels like when I first heard this album, it didn't grab me. But this song instantly was a standout to where out of all songs on the album, besides the singles, this was the non-single track that instantly grabbed me. And I don't mean with all singles, because I guess I count Miasma and Pro Memoria in that because they were played live ahead of time. So they were kind of like singles. I had heard them before the album came out. But this song I hadn't. And when I got to this song, I remember being like, what's this one called again? And immediately going back and looking and seeing Witch Image and writing it down in my phone as one that was definitely going to be one of my favorites forever. And it has been.
I think lyrically, this is my favorite. It's not even just song-wise, but lyric-wise, this is up there. It's up there with many other songs in the catalog. This is a top 5 Ghost track for me. Big time.
Absolutely. I agree. I almost don't have anything to say. Words don't do it justice.
They really don't. And like my favorite line from this song is I've always kept you closer than you've known. I'm riding in the shadows behind you on a pale white horse. Like that is such a cool fucking line, honestly.
Yeah. I'm taking, for those listening, I just have to take a minute because I have full body goosebumps just thinking about it. It is, my God. Yeah. What a phenomenal song. And what a phenomenal visual thing too, because this album leans into a lot of the stuff, there's lots of imagery of, white horses, the apocalypse, the end times, the horsemen and biblical stuff and all of that and revelations and everything in this album. And this song visually encapsulates that while also sonically encapsulating that. It's got the spookiness with those spooky organs, the poppiness. It's an arena rock banger. This is the song. And it worked. I always got to say it. It worked exceptionally well live. They played it when I saw them, and it worked so well. It is a damn shame that it is not on the set list the last couple of tours, because this would work in any set list. You could throw this into any set list they're doing, and it would work, and people would respond.
Oh, this fucker better come back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I will write a strongly worded letter if it does not.
No, it's one of those ones, and another one for me is Stand By Him, to where it's like you could throw it in any era on any set list and it will work. It's just that good of a song, and it has all the elements, and it hits live. It's a good mid-tempo rocker. You could argue the verses are a little slow, but they work well. It gives a break. It's a great, backing vocals. This song is phenomenal.
Yeah, no notes ever.
And I'm glad it's getting its dues. I see a lot of people list it as one of their favorites. And I'm glad, because it absolutely deserves it. This is not an overhyped song at all. 10 out of 10, chef's kiss.
Yeah, it is. It is not as Cardi would say, hyped up shit. It's great. It's fucking great. And then we roll out of Witch Image, which I love the droning ring of the guitar chord that just drones off, seemingly never ending. I believe, as highly as we speak of Miasma, I have got to say that I think, objectively, Helvetis Fonster might actually be Ghost's best written instrumental piece.
Yeah. And I, unfortunately, in my listening, neglected a lot. And I don't know why. I just do. But every time I do listen to this track, I think it may be just one that I don't listen to in playlists a lot, but I do listen to when I'm listening to the album. So that's why I kind of don't gravitate towards it. But I love this track. It is so progressive and proggy and interesting and has so much going on. And it feels nostalgic, but it also feels new. And there's so much to it. Yeah, I love this track.
It's a long one, but I think my favorite thing about it is the way that it starts, and then it gets to like this halfway point and it becomes something completely different. And holy shit, like if you heard the front half and then you heard the second half, but not in the same run, you wouldn't think it's the same track. And it's very well done. And like if you took Helvetis Fonster completely out and you went from Witch Image to Life Eternal, it would not work, because Helvetis Fonster is that perfect bridged gap of that. Yeah. We talked about how Meliora had like 3 songs and instrumental, 3 songs and instrumental. Like that's how this one kind of works too. There's an instrumental, then 3 songs, which they're all songs, but you know what I mean, like lyrically, and then like another instrumental, and then 3 more tracks, and then an instrumental that leads into the last track. Like quite literally leads into the last track, because Helvetis Fonster closes with Death Bells, you know, and Life Eternal begins with one.
In listening to this album recently, so, and this is my time to talk about this too, again, is this album for me has been an album that I've had ups and downs with. I've always told people, I don't particularly care for it. I like this album, but it's not my favorite, and I don't listen to it often. And I've talked about, because I feel like it's not, I love it as an album, I just don't find myself going back to it as much as I go back to individual songs. But even then, I don't do that as much, because I feel like it needs to be listened to as whole. And I don't know, for whatever reason it is. It probably is the negative associations with some of the lyric stuff. But I listened to this album about a month ago. I've listened to it a lot since then. But I decided I was just going to give it one more chance. And I was going to listen to it for the first time in a while. And I found that I love this album much more than I thought I did. And honestly, out of all albums in the catalog, I have the most nostalgia and fond memories to this era and this album, and I'm listening to this and this rollout and everything about it. And part of it for me is how well this album flows. And the transition here takes me to a place visually and mentally of peace, but also mourning. And I don't know how to explain that, but there's this thing, as I'm thinking about it, I can feel like my body relaxing, as it's just that morning bell. It's almost meditative, and it leads right into Life Eternal.
You know what it reminds me of? And this is another weird comparison, like how I did with Dance Macabre being the End of the World as We Know It track on this one. There is a song on Pink Floyd's The Division Bell called High Hopes, where it opens with that pulsating bell. I believe it's High Hopes, if I'm remembering right. That's what it reminds me of, because there's something pretty about that one, and there's something pretty about that starting this song. But
well, it's almost as if everyone's died.
That's the thing, is that
and it's so quiet that it's peaceful, right, but it's sad.
Yeah, it is, and the lyrics.
It's like a moment of silence.
Yeah, like lyrically, this is, you know, it's talking about just if you literally had the decision to be immortal, like would you do it? You know, and it's not the narrator in question, you know, that would be giving this story. It's not a glamorous thing to have immortality, because it is a never-ending cycle of loss. You will always experience loss with eternal life, and that is a really fucked up catch-22.
Yeah, and the concept of eternal life is something not anything new to us, right? We've thought about it as humans forever. The fountain of youth. Would you do this? Elixirs, you know, magic, vampires, right? And, you know, the tragic vampire who, you know, Dracula, right? Is a great example of, you know, it's one of those things. And you think of, you know, there's that scene in most Dracula adaptations, but especially in Bram Stoker's Dracula, where, you see he wants to turn, her, but it's a cruel sentence to do that, and you kind of have to think of it. It's that same type of thing. It's everyone at first glance is like, yeah, of course I would jump on that. But as I think about it, I think to myself and I think about my situation in my life, and I'm just like, that's the most terrifying sounding thing. That's a horror movie. The idea of losing everyone in my life and just, no, absolutely not. Cycles are meant to end at some point. Everything ends.
Which is the point of the band.
Mm-hmm. Which is, we could talk about that for days, but that is a thing that Ghost teaches you, is enjoy the now, because everything does end. Life Eternal does a great job of telling you that. And from what I've read on the new album, Skeletá, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, there's a similar song on there that kind of has that same kind of message. A message that I think Ghost tells you throughout your whole time is, you will die. It's not an if, it's a when.
Yeah.
There is mortality that we all have to face. But that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's not, you will die, everything sucks. It is, you will die, and there's kind of a beauty in that. We have a short amount of time on this earth, and we can make the best of it, create great relationships, further the earth, further our humanity. And at the end of that, that's just how the cycle goes. That's how life works. And if to disrupt that could be disastrous.
You know it. I can't top that.
I know that was super deep and like philosophical almost, in a way, but it's like, it does make you think. This album makes you think more than some of the other ones. A lot of times we talk about it and it's like, religious institutions and things like that. But sure. This album makes you think.
Rating out of 5 on this one. We're doing because you brought it up the last time, so I would love to do both like objective rating and personal ratings on these albums going forward.
Objective rating, I'm going to say 4. Yeah, 4. I think I can give it a solid 4. Personal rating, 3.5. As I've talked tonight about this album, my opinion has changed a lot. And I don't know why that is. Even from listening to it, my opinion has changed. And I don't know what it is, but after talking about this album, I've fallen in love with it even more. Because I don't think I've ever fully talked about this album and track by track like this. And I realized that
it's like a catharsis.
I love more songs. Yeah, I love the themes. I love the era. And I love, going track by track. There are more songs I don't think I said anything negative about any of these. And I don't think I said anything negative about, like, my issue I've always had with this album is that I thought the pacing dies out. Halfway through, the pacing dies out. And it just made me not listen back to that.
See, I think this will be one where we have, like, a differing opinion on that one. Like, for me, I think the flow of this record, I think it's perfect. I think conceptually, if you listen to, and I'm including Impera on this one, like not to even jump, forward, but just for the sake of this discussion, if you listen to every album, and this includes Meliora, from start to finish as a one through listen, this album to me flows better than any of their albums in the catalog, like from start to finish, because it doesn't feel like it's just a collection of songs. It doesn't feel like, it feels like it was written with purpose and even more thoughtfulness as far as where it crescendos with Miasma and then Dance Macabre and then like the come down of it, because you think about in the very beginning, it's uplifting and it's I say uplifting, it's more high energy, but once Miasma passes and we get the impending death, that's coming, of course it's going to die out. That's my view on it. Like, of course the back half is going to die out. It's kind of a somber move towards the end of this album. Objectively, I will agree with you. Objectively, it is a 4. Like, if I'm looking at it in terms of technique, recording, the balance of lyrics to song, runtime even. Personally, this is a 4.5 for me. Like you, the more that I have talked about this album, the more I realize it probably actually sits higher, for me than I originally thought it did. It's so good. And I feel like the thematics of it and the way that it flows is why I feel the way that I do personally about it, as far as like giving it such a high like number praise. Like with that, I have nothing really bad to say as a whole.
Yeah, and as the more I think about it, I don't disagree at all. I don't disagree. I feel confident in my ratings still.
Sure.
But the pacing issues I had with it, I've always said objectively the pacing I think works really well, but for me it didn't. But I think I've came at this album wrong for a long time. And I looked at it as a rock album, but if I look at it as a storytelling, theatrical, almost musical, it flows perfectly. And I thought for a long time, would I change things? How would I move things around to make the pacing better? And I can't. Because, as you said, it dies out. And it leaves you with this feeling of, is this the same album that started with Rats? And I would agree that out of all the albums, it is the best album flow-wise. And it doesn't feel like a collection of songs. It tells a distinct narrative in its flow and story. And it works well.
The way that I kind of come to that is, if I can put this on, if I can put any album on, if I can put any playlist on, and I don't realize the song has changed to the next one, but I'm still like in a zone, that constitutes fucking greatness for me. I don't know what constitutes greatness for anyone listening out there for like, the stuff I just mentioned, but if I can get so lost in something that I'm not realizing that, oh shit, this album's over. Like, holy shit.
And it does that for me too. So yeah, I agree.
It's definitely different. You know what I mean? Like, as far as Ghost goes, it's definitely different, but in a good way. And it leaves the door very wide open, for something different to happen yet again. Because when we come back next week, we're going to be talking about Impera, which I know for a fact we will probably have some, not with each other, but I feel like we may have, I don't know, some divisive thoughts, but probably more along the same, from the fandom at large. Because I know Impera was a lot of folks' first Ghost album.
As was for a lot of people Prequelle too. So like, I want to say as we wrap this up, I don't dislike this album by any means. I know that I've been more critical than I have been with the past ones with this one. It's just because for a while I've convinced myself to some degree that I didn't vibe with this album very much. But as I've talked about it, I think this is just an album that I didn't realize how much I loved. So I'm really glad we did talk about it, because now all I want to do is end this and just listen to it on repeat. And yeah, like this album to me, I'll always say, I saw them 3 times on this tour. I met them on this tour. I bought a lot of merch. This was my first time being really, 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 really involved with the fandom, was this era. And so it really is, I think, the most special album and era to me. So yeah, I love it. I'm glad we did this and talked about it. And I'm so excited to come back and talk about Impera and where we went next.
Same. For past, present, and future episodes of GonstFM Off Air, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. You can leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a rating and leave comments on individual episodes on Spotify. And if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please consider subscribing to our channel, clicking the bell for notifications for future episodes, or maybe leave a like on the video or a comment down below. Any engagement helps. If you would like to come to a future GonstFM radio ritual, if you would like to get GonstFM merchandise, or if you would like to join the official Facebook group GonstFam, or if you would like to join Uncle Ghoul's Facebook group, Ghost Cosplay, all of this can be found in the show notes below. And so, our dearest Gonslings, that brings today's episode to a close. Some of you we will see in Internet Land, and the rest of you we will see in GonstFam. Take care of yourselves. And remember, until next time, in Gonst, we tronst. I'm Papa X.
I'm Uncle Ghoul.
And we'll see you next time.